Hi everyone, I'm Chyill, and welcome back to another detailed champion guide. Today, I'll be talking about Poloma, the Psycho Pomp, and so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Poloma is a very versatile range support champion who mainly supports a team with a dual function abilities which can either help allied champions or damage enemy champions. Originally, I had a really tough time figuring out how to properly play Poloma. It was hard trying to figure out what were the best and most effective ways of utilizing her abilities to their best effect. But after almost exclusively playing with her for almost 2 weeks, I find that she is actually a very fun champion to play, and can be very powerful in the right hands. If you're struggling with her, I hope this guide can help you out with playing her. In my opinion, even though her self-healing is minimal compared to other supports, she helps the team in her own unique ways, and is a very versatile champion. This is because she has options in group healing and damage, as well as single target burst healing and damage. She also has various escape abilities, crowd control effects, and other utility abilities that really help you to control the fight and win the round more easily. So if you're trying to pick up Poloma, be prepared to put in lots of practice with her because she is not a beginner friendly champion. So before we start, just like the guides I have made previously for Jade, Pearl and Ashka, I have split this guide up into different sections, and I've included timestamps directly to each section in the description below. As usual, feel free to skip ahead to the section that you need if you've already watched the video before. And again, we'll start this guide off with looking at Poloma's abilities, before talking about her playstyle, strengths and weaknesses. Then we'll look at her Battlerites options, and finally we finish off with some of her gameplay tips and potential combos when playing Poloma. And so, without further ado, let's begin. First off, let's talk about her abilities. Starting off with Poloma's left click or mouse 1 ability, her mouse 1 ability is Soul Bolt, and this is a very complex bread and butter ability that allows her to both heal allies or damage enemies with it. Hitting an enemy will inflict the Soul Bind debuff on the enemy, and the debuff basically makes it so that a percentage of the damage you deal to an enemy that has Soul Bind will also be transmitted to other nearby enemies that has Soul Bind on them. So for example, two enemies A and B are near to each other. Hitting A will inflict Soul Bind on A, and then you continue to attack B. As you attack B, Soul Bind will also be inflicted on B, and as you continue to attack B, a percentage of the damage you deal to B will also affect A, as long as A is nearby and still has that debuff on him. So this is in essence a sort of a mini AoE effect with your left click ability. Hitting an ally with Soul Bolt, however, inflicts Spirit Link on the ally, and Spirit Link works exactly the same way as with Soul Bind, but it is the healing version. Basically, you heal other nearby allies that has Spirit Link on them when you heal an ally that has Spirit Link on him or her. Poloma herself has Spirit Link by default, and so you just need to hit an ally once with your mouse 1, and you will be able to share any healing done on each of you for the duration of Spirit Link. Also, do take note of the different percentage numbers of both Soul Bind and Spirit Link. Phew, that was long. Now let us move on to her right click ability. Her right click or mouse 2 ability is Other Side. The ability basically makes a target ally or yourself invulnerable and move faster for a short period of time, making it one of your best escape options in sticky situations, and also the best way to protect your ally who overextended too much. When the target comes out of invulnerability, nearby allies also get healed for a bit. It can also be used to clear debuffs from allies since it makes them invulnerable. Clearing petrifies or incapacitates off of allies will be very helpful too, and you should definitely try to do that when you can. This skill, being as useful as it is, comes with the downside of having a long cooldown, so try to use it wisely, because proper usage of this skill can make or break the round. Moving on, her spacebar ability is Spirit Guide. Spirit Guides let you shoot out a spirit that will heal an ally or deal damage and knock back the enemy that it hits. You will be able to recast this within 3 seconds to teleport to the spirit. If you miss an ally or enemy, the Spirit Guide will stay at the position it landed on, and you will still be able to teleport there whenever you wish to. I will go more into the space ability later on in the video. Her Q ability is Spirit Rift, and this ability allows Poloma to interrupt the next ability cast by enemies in an AoE around her. If this skill interrupts an enemy ability, it will inflict panic on the enemy, making them run away for 2 seconds. And if you deal too much damage to them when they are panicked, the effect will break, so do bear this in mind. Moving on, Poloma's E ability is Ghost Wolf. This ability summons a Ghost Wolf that will strike up to 3 targets, jumping from the first target to the next nearest target and so on, while dealing damage to them and applying the Soul Bind debuff on all of them. This ability is a good way to deal loads of damage on the enemy team, especially if they are clumped together in an area. The jump range is actually quite generous, so feel free to spam the ability whenever you can, but be careful because it has a short range compared to her other ranged abilities. Moving on to her abilities that cost energy, her R ability is Pixie, and this ability summons a Pixie that mimics your Mouse 1 attacks, dealing slightly reduced damage and healing compared to your standard Mouse 1 ability to target that it hits. The ability costs 25 energy, but it is super useful in burst healing or burst damage situations since it almost doubles your damage or healing output. Her first EX ability is a shift space ability and it is called Soul Transfer. It costs 25 energy and it functions mostly the same as a space ability. The only difference is if it hits an ally or enemy, instead of teleporting you to the ally or enemy, you actually swap locations with the target. In situations where your ally is cornered by two enemies and you are far away, you can swap with one of the enemies, turning the fight to favor you and your teammate. But of course the ability has to hit the enemy you want to hit for it to work. Her second EX ability is a Shift Q ability, and it is Soul Drain. Soul Drain functions as Soul Rift, her Q ability would, except this ability also drains 15 health from the enemy, making it a good trading tool since you regain health while making them lose some and CC them as well, allowing you and your teammates to easily target him with abilities. If you manage to hit more than one enemy, you will deal damage and heals for each of the enemy in the AoE, and that's always nice. Finally, her ultimate ability on the F key is Ancestral Spirit. The ability summons a spirit at a location that will deal some damage and snare all enemies in the area, while also healing allies in the area. After 2 seconds, the spirit releases a second wave of energy that deals even more damage and healing to enemies and allies within the AoE respectively. And so, that's about it for Poloma's abilities. Now let us move on to her playstyle, strengths, and weaknesses. Poloma's playstyle, I feel, is a bit back and forth, and it's a bit hard to define her playstyle properly. It is sometimes good to just hang back and heal teammates up, but it is also sometimes effective to be a bit more aggressive. I suppose it comes down to experience with Poloma and the cooldowns to know how aggressive she should be at any given point. To try to summarize her playstyle, I think that when the right skills are ready and off of cooldown, she can benefit from playing aggressively when she is up against the right enemies and they have their escapes on cooldown. And when Poloma's skills are on cooldown, it is more beneficial to hang back and play a little more passively and just heal up teammates and play more reactively rather than proactively. She should also be trying to spreading her debuff or buff on enemies and allies during her downtimes. Moving on to her strengths and weaknesses, I think Poloma is strong because she is very versatile. All her abilities can either heal or damage, and she has the ability to not only heal or damage in AoEs, but she also has the ability to deal single target bursts when needed. Couple that with her several CC options, and she is one of the most versatile champions in the game. Another strength of Poloma's is her kiting and poking ability. Her ability to attack with her Mouse 1 ability and move at the same time, coupled with her selection of methods to CC and get people away from you, like her panic and her knockback from her space for example. What you get is a champion who is very effective at kiting, and a pain to deal with for the enemy. Using her various CC options, she is also very good with controlling the battlefield. For example, her shift space ability allows her to swap positions with another player, and thus controlling the positioning of players to her liking, or using her Q to panic one enemy away while you and your teammate focus the other, and so on. Moving on, Poloma has a few weaknesses. One weakness of Poloma's is that you need good aim to not just effectively deal damage, but heal teammates as well. Needing good aim to deal damage is normal, but having to aim well to heal allies makes it a bit unreliable sometimes, especially in situations where they are almost dead. There are of course other abilities that helps with healing, but sometimes they are on cooldown and so you might need to rely on your Mouse 1 for those situations. Try to make sure you have decent aim so that you can do well with Poloma or in fact any champion. Another weakness of hers is her over-reliance on her right-click ability to escape. She is really quite vulnerable when her right-click is on cooldown, and since she sometimes needs to use it on allies as well as herself, it is easy to be bursted down by ranged enemies, because it is so much harder for Poloma to escape without her right-click. Her space could work as an escape, but is usually not fast enough to avoid abilities with, since it is a two-part ability. Finally, I think her biggest weakness is her weak self-healing potential. Poloma does not have many self-healing options that does not have a cooldown. Her Mouse 1 ability can only heal herself for a minuscule amount when she is healing a teammate, and this limitation really makes her self-healing unreliable at best, and so if Poloma falls behind, it can be tough to come back. And so that's about it for her playstyle, strengths and weaknesses. Now let us move on to Poloma's Battlerites options. Once again, you can pause the video to slowly read through every single Battlerites if you wish, before I go through my thoughts on the Battlerites, since it will take a long time for me to read it all out for you. And so, pause now to read them all. Okay, now that you've read them all, let's continue. On her first tier, I think that Affection should be the best pick most of the time. As you know, Poloma doesn't have many self-heal options, and so making Ghost Wolf heal you when it returns is a pretty good deal. And since Ghost Wolf is such a damaging ability, you'd be using it very often anyways, so it's kinda like a win-win situation. Vengeful Spirit can be pretty good, like it can be used aggressively to cause panic on your enemy team, since you could Q once, space onto someone else, and Q again, but I think its usefulness is quite a bit less than Affection. Spectre makes your right click invisible, and I think it is just okay. It is not that great. At the end of the day, the primary purpose of your right click is to avoid damage and dispel debuffs with the invulnerability. Going invisible is just a bonus which isn't that needed in my opinion, so Affection is like the best 90% of the time for me. On to the second tier, it would be a choice between Direwolf and Phantasm for me. Direwolf makes it so that it roots everyone the wolf hits, and the jump range for the wolf is actually surprisingly large. So, chances are your wolf will hit most of your enemies if it hits the first one, making it super valuable, since if you pick the heal in the first tier, it now also roots your enemies in place for your allies to dish out lots of damage. Phantasm could be good if you want to protect an ally that will take heavy damage, or to focus down a single enemy. But if your team lacks that coordination, Direwolf would be better in most cases. Spiritual Wind is lacking I feel, even though it gives so much movement speed. In games like these, movement speed is so important, but I don't think using Q just to get movement speed is good enough. And what's more, usually after you use Q and panic somebody, you would turn around and help out your teammate instead, and you wouldn't really need to run all that far since you're a ranged champion anyways, so I wouldn't recommend Spiritual Wind. In the third tier, I think all three of the Battlerites are good choices. Even though I usually pick Pixie Dust for the increased burst when using Pixie, Ghostly Strike and Into the Realm can be good too. As I mentioned, Poloma's right click is so important to her kit, and so Into the Realm can be pretty good, since having its cooldown reduced is quite huge. The increased movement speed is an added bonus too, allowing Poloma herself or her teammates to quickly reposition for the next engagement. Ghostly Strike can be good in situations where you want to be more effective at separating the enemy teammates from each other. The 60% increased knockback force makes it a lot easier to do this, so the Battlerites can be quite handy sometimes. In most cases, however, when there isn't a situation where you really need any of the other two Battlerites, going with Pixie Dust for the increased burst would be the best pick, especially because many people underestimate Poloma's damage potential with Pixie up. Moving on to the fourth tier, the Battlerites choice for this tier is quite situational as well. Shimmering Bond and Dark Souls are quite self-explanatory. If you need more healing or more damage, just choose the corresponding one. The interesting one here is Soul Theft. Soul Theft allows your right click to give you a bit of bonus damage and healing when you move through an enemy while invulnerable. This can be quite good if you enjoy using your mouse suit ability a little more aggressively. Otherwise, sticking with one of the other two options would be the more passive and safer choice. Personally, I usually choose Shimmering Bond in 3 vs 3s so that I can heal more, and in 2 vs 2s, it would be one of the other two. Finally, on the fifth and final tier, Equilibrium would be the pick most of the time. This makes it so that you don't have to manually apply the buffs and debuffs on your allies and enemies once you use your ultimate ability. So it's a bit like free damage and free healing when you use your ultimate ability. The second impact of your ultimate very seldom hits. Unless you have your teammate locking the enemy in place right after the first hit, enemies will likely have escaped before they will be hit by the second impact. So maybe if you have combo potential with your teammates, then Condemn might be good. And so that's about it on Poloma's Battlerites. Now let us move on to some of my gameplay tips for playing Poloma, as well as some potential combos with Poloma. My first tip for playing Poloma is to be alert for times when you should be using your mouse tool ability. Of course, when you're getting focused and you're in a bad spot, you should use it on yourself. But when you're relatively safe, try to be alert for when your teammate might need a hand, like maybe if he cannot get out of an AoE fast enough, or if he is incapacitated or something, use that mouse tool on him to help him out. Another tip for playing Poloma is to get used to hitting those ghost wolves. A large portion of her AoE damage as well as her utility comes from those wolves. Being able to deal so much damage to multiple targets as well as root them is super helpful to the team. So try your best to learn how to hit them every single time. Moving on, as I mentioned in the playstyle section, I think Poloma can benefit from some aggressiveness once in a while, so practice more with her to get a feel of when she can be aggressive and when she can't. A lot of it depends on her available cooldowns as well as the enemy champion and what cooldowns have they used. She can afford to be more aggressive when she has the cooldowns ready, but not so much when they're not, since she will be too vulnerable. By going aggressive, I mean like using R for some burst damage instead of healing, or like using space to close the gap on an enemy instead of using it for escape purposes. Basically doing riskier and less passive plays to gain the advantage, or at least throw the enemy off. More on her space ability, I actually like to use it aggressively more than defensively. Only occasionally do I use it as a heal. The space ability has lots of combo potential, like setting up those Chyill abilities on an enemy for some free damage and CC. But it can also be used as a knockback to further separate the enemies from each other, and this can be very useful, especially if you and your team are trying to focus one guy down first. Another combo that I like to use with Poloma is a panic into Ghost Wolf combo. Basically, you panic the enemy and they will run in a straight line, making it very easy to hit the wolf on them. You can also use spacebar to close the gap first for the Q ability if you need to. Another obvious combo is to root the enemies with Ghost Wolf and go on to use the ultimate ability right on top of them. This way it guarantees the first hit from the ulti unless they jump away with an escape cooldown, of course. Overall, I think Poloma is a great champion and she has answers to almost any situation since she is so versatile. The main thing is to really understand what all her abilities can do, think about them a little bit when using them instead of using them blindly and not thinking. Practice and you should improve with Poloma. And so yeah, that's about it for my Poloma guide. I hope you found it useful. I have tallied up the polls on my Ashka guide and it seems like a Rokan guide will be up next, so subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for that. You can vote for which champion guide you want to see next after Rokan's by clicking on the I button at the top right now. Also, you can check out my other videos too if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching my video, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button, comment and share this video with your friends as well. And until next time guys, have a great day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.